Next on the list of sports games is NCAA 2009, and probably more than any game that I bought during my years with PlayStation 3, this is the one that needs the most explanation and changed my view on sports video games and my entire video game collection. But before I begin, hey YouTube auditor, fuck you. Now, I've said this in countless videos before. I've said this in question and answer sessions. I've said this in some sports videos that I've done, hipfire commentaries, and created an entire video using Modern Warfare 3 in the background comparing Call of Duty to sports games. I do not buy sports games in back-to-back years. I learned that lesson the hard way back on PlayStation 2, and I had planned to continue that train of rationale on PlayStation 3. And my plan would have worked for the best had it not been for NCAA 2008 and 2009. Now, let me run through the background story one last quick time for those who don't remember. Back on PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, I was a sports game addict. I bought and played pretty much every sports game every single year. Like an idiot, I would buy EA's version of the game, I would buy 2K's version of the game, I'd buy 989 Studios' version of the same fucking sport. So I had Madden, 2K Football, Triple Play Baseball, MLB The Show, you name it. Every fucking game that they released for sports, I all had it in the same fucking year. After realizing I didn't have enough time to play every game, I started slowing down on what I bought. I only bought the better versions of sports games in a given year. Then I realized I didn't even have time for that. And I saw that games really weren't improving year to year. They were basically just making roster updates each year. So I stopped buying sports games every single year. I went to a 2-year cycle for professional sports and a 4-year cycle for my NCAA sports. I would buy baseball and hockey in 1 year, then football and basketball the next year, then go back to baseball and hockey the year after that. I would get NCAA football every 4 years, NCAA basketball every 4 years, alternating those with football and basketball years respectively. That way you can carry over the rosters from college all the way to the basketball games and the football games. Throw in some other specialty sports games, you know, like Tiger Woods golf and shit like that, and I bought shitloads of sports games. Motherfucker, I was keeping EA in business for years. So on PlayStation 3 release, the last NCAA game I bought on PlayStation 2 was the 2004 version of the game. The last football game I had was Madden 2006. By that time, 2K had already lost their license in the license war with EA and the NFL, but I'm going to talk about that in another video. So, I was due for 2 sports games that year, and I got NCAA 2008, which sucked. As I said yesterday, and the reasons why it sucked. Because it sucked so hard, I was hesitant to buy Madden 2008, and when that game came out and the review said the same exact thing about the generation gap, I skipped Madden. I was not about to waste my money on another fucked up game. Fuck that shit, man. 2008 sucked, so I'm not going to buy Madden because that game sucked ass as well. Basketball was also due, and the reviews said the same thing, console generation gap. So basically, I only had NCAA 2008 that year, not wanting to buy sports games that ran into the same problem yesterday's game had. Well, the next year comes around, and Friday's video is going to showcase another sports games that I bought. That turned out pretty well, by the way, but I'm going to get to that video on Friday. But consider how bad NCAA 2008 was, and the fact that I went 4 years without a college football game. I barely wanted a college football game. So, I paid attention to the reviews of NCAA 2009 prior to the release of the game. The review stated it was going to be an improvement. EA said they had learned their lesson and they got their shit together for this game. I took everyone's word for it. And I went out and I bought NCAA 2009 hoping to satisfy my college football and sports needs at the time. Because the sports game I had just bought a few months prior turned out to be pretty good. And again, that's going to come on Friday. So I figured the new consoles were on their way to making something decent. Now, there is absolutely no question the 2009 version is a big improvement over yesterday's video in 2008. There is not one iota of argument against that. The gameplay was much smoother as they reworked the player animation, the collision controls and shit like that. Player sizes were more accurate, where you could see the difference between a running back and an offensive lineman. The playbook improved, where you now had the 4 quadrants with all had a corresponding button, as opposed to having to highlight your play each and every fucking time. Teams were given alternate uniforms. All stadiums were available now. Kickoffs and field goals weren't fucked up. Teams had specific animation celebrations like the Gator Chomp, Gig 'em, Hook 'em Horn, Salutes, all of that shit. They also added some new features, and you guys are going to notice there's this shit, the quarterback quiz in the game. When I throw an interception with Tim Tebow, you're going to notice that there's going to be this quiz that comes up. However, for some reason, they removed this feature in newer versions of the game, which I don't understand. Why remove it? I actually like this feature, and I thought it was an accurate portrayal of what quarterbacks do after an interception. I mean, think about it. When you watch a game, usually what does a quarterback do? They run over to the sidelines, they take a look at the screen prints of the defense to see what play they called and how they disguise their attack on the play. So it seemed like a pretty good idea at the time, and it seemed like a pretty accurate idea at the time. Personally, I wouldn't have minded if they kept this feature in all the games. I thought it was a pretty cool idea. But anyway, top to bottom, there were improvements in this game. Some things didn't change, like dynasty recruiting, the opening sequence of games, the overall interface of the game. And you know what? You can't expect a 100% overall every single year. Improvements were made from 2008, and that's the most important thing because that game was almost unplayable. But the sad fact was, the PlayStation 2 version of the game was still better. Still, 1 year later, the older generation was still the most playable version of the game. Now, I don't know if that's a testament to the power of the PlayStation 2 or the quality of the game EA built in the prior generation, or the lack of cell processor knowledge developers had at the time. But it was very clear that the PlayStation 3 version was vastly inferior. And that's when reality struck me about games and the decision I made to purchase my console. The PlayStation 3 was more powerful, more expensive, and a vastly superior machine to the 360. And that's when reality struck me about the games and the decision I made on which console I purchased. The PlayStation 3, the more powerful, the more expensive, the vastly superior machine to the 360, was a bitch to program for. Developers were making games in the easier to learn 360, which had better online capabilities and a larger install base, and then ported that over to the PlayStation 3 version because it was a bitch to program for. Essentially, all the advantages PlayStation 2 had over the Xbox OG were now in reverse. 360 was the preferred machine to developers, and the PlayStation 3 got stuck with sloppy seconds. Anybody that has both consoles will tell you that almost every one of the early multi-platform games, I mean, we're talking the first 3 years of the consoles, the 360 version performed better, while the PlayStation 3 version was buggy as shit. NCAA 2009 was no different. It was an improved version from the prior year, but ultimately a buggy as shit version compared to all the platforms. 360 ran at 60 frames per second, while PlayStation 3 struggled to run at 30 frames per second. I mean, we're talking, when you got into the goddamn Dynasty, that shit would stall like a motherfucker. It was an inferior product of the group. Every sports game that followed in the next few years, with the exception of one franchise, which again I'm going to talk about on Friday, had the same issue. 360 was better. PlayStation 3 were all horrible ports. I chose the wrong console for sports games. If I wanted to play the superior version of sports games, I had to play it on a 360. And since I couldn't justify splitting my limited gaming time among two consoles, I stuck with the PlayStation 3 and made a very difficult decision at the time. After NCAA 2009, I all but abandoned sports games. Madden was coming up and the reviews and previews confirmed my suspicions. NBA 2K was coming up and my same suspicions were confirmed about 2K Studios following what EA did. Unlike the prior generation, where PlayStation 2 was the dominant console, PlayStation 3 was not the preferred console. It was an albatross of the group. It was the black sheep. If I wanted a good sports game, I had to accept that the PlayStation 3 version was going to be far less superior. And pretty much, that became the norm for almost every single game. We're not just talking sports games. We're talking action games. We're talking adventure games, first-person shooters. 360 had the better version of all games. PlayStation 3 had the shittier version. And I had to pick and choose which games and which studios made efforts to narrow the gap in quality. Otherwise, I'd be playing the crap-ass version of a certain game, and who the fuck wants to play the crap-ass version of a game? Well, I guess Wii U owners will tell you what they play. Anyway, the decision to leave sports franchises behind was made easier by the fact that other games on the horizon look pretty fucking cool. Other genres of game, and I never considered playing like alien shooters or military shooters or some crazy ass motherfucking assassin and shit like that from the turn of the century. Solid Snake, Kratos on the horizon. I had a whole bunch of games that were going to keep me busy, to keep me away from sports games. I knew that in giving up sports, I was going to have to expand my horizon of what video games I would be playing in my future. The majority of my PlayStation 2 library was sports games. There is no question about that. About 80% of my games on PlayStation 2 were sports games. And now, because of my decision to stick with PlayStation 3, I would have to give them up until at least the quality gap was improved up in this motherfucker. NCAA 2009 was the most important game in my library for the sole purpose that its failure to win me over as a sports fan turned me into a well-rounded gamer in which I expanded my library tenfold. Without this game being an average game, without it being the lowest quality among all the platforms, I probably would have continued playing mainly sports games. It's an odd thing to say, it's an odd way of looking at a game, but sometimes the most impactful decisions that you make come from the mistakes you make. NCAA was my last hope at having a quality sports game, and it didn't give me the feeling that I was going to be playing a quality game. Thus, it triggered the long series of games, which you will see in this series, that were the result of me moving away from sports games. All the games in my collection, all 55 of them, none are more important than this one. This is the game that pretty much shaped my collection for the entire library I have on PlayStation 3. Because I wasn't playing sports games, because this game was such a below average game, I looked at games I otherwise would have never bought. I probably would have never bought the Killzone series. I probably would have never played Uncharted. Never would have played Assassin's Creed, Little Big Planet, The Last of Us, Call of Duty. All of those games were impacted by my decision not to play sports games anymore. All the games that you're going to see after this week probably would have never made it onto my PlayStation 2 console. That shows you just how impactful this game really was. And with that being said, I still have 3 more sports videos this week, and you guys are going to get to see some more insight and stories regarding those games. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit. And I'm pretty sure not a single person was able to guess that this was the game that I was referring to as the most important game. And I'll see you guys in the next video.
Nice job by the offense. When it Kirk, well, coach, just like you always say, keep it simple when you're down.